Welcome to Private Club Radio, your weekly source for industry education, news and discussion. Broadcasting from Tampa, Florida, ladies and gentlemen, here is your host, Gabriel Aloisi.
Hey, pumped to be with you here on Private Club Radio on another Monday morning. The sun is shining. It's 80-something degrees here in Tampa, Florida, and I'm feeling good. Hope you're feeling good wherever you are at. I read a great book this year, well, right at the end of last year, really. It's called Breeding Gazelles, and what's funny about that book is I was looking for a book to read at the end of the year. I had a little bit of time to do some reading, and went on Amazon, was kind of poking around. Then I thought about this book that I had heard about, someone had mentioned, and ended up buying the book. And come to find out, my agency had actually laid out the interior of the book, so we had a copy of the book on my computer at work, and had no idea, but doesn't matter. I'm really happy to support the author because the book was incredibly valuable to me. It's really helped my business, and definitely one that I think you should pick up if you get a chance. It's called Breeding Gazelles. But the big lesson, there was lots of lessons in the book, but the biggest lesson that I took away from the book was a quote. The author interviewed another gentleman, and the quote was, "Instead of trying something new this year, why not try to do what you're already doing 20% better?" Now, for me, someone who I like to consider myself an innovator, someone who's coming up with new ideas all the time, someone who is doing things differently, that concept is a little bit foreign, I've got to admit. And I wonder if some of our listeners feel the same way. A lot of times when you're cutting edge, bleeding edge, when you are trying to innovate and elevate your members' experience, we're often trying to come up with new ideas, fresh ideas, new ways of looking at things. And believe me, I think that is something that every great leader should be doing, absolutely. But at the same time, you've got to know what's in your wheelhouse, and you've got to be able to do those things really, really, really well. Now, a great example of that, I was at the European Conference on Club Management. As you probably know, I spoke there in November. And of course, after I speak, I always stick around and listen to the other sessions because I am more of a listener than a talker anyways. And one of the best, probably my favorite session of the conference was Ross Matheson. He is the manager at the All England Club, where they put on Wimbledon every year. And Ross talked about the things that the All England Club does right when the tournament ends. So they have this tournament, hundreds of thousands of people come, and they take a couple of days off after the tournament just to relax and reset. But then they get right back to work and they start a list. I think they call it the list. And the list is every single item that they want to improve the next year for the tournament, whether that's fan experience, taking better care of the players, and really just putting on a better tournament every year. This year, that list was, I believe he said, somewhere around 1,400 or 1,500 items. And it could be as small as the chair in row B is squeaking, or these tables were not aligned at a 90-degree angle, or the water fountain's temperature was not a cool 46 degrees or whatever they want that water temperature to be. It goes down to the nitty gritty. And what they do is they look at that list every year, and then they sort it by most priority, and they try to tackle that so that the next year's tournament is that much better. And listening to that, I just thought to myself, how cool is that? I mean, how amazing is that really, that they're thinking down to those little tiny details at Wimbledon about how they can improve the experience. I mean, they've been putting this tournament on for over 100 years, I think 140 years or something like that, and they're still improving the process. Just incredible. So take a look at what you've been doing the same way for the last 5 years or 10 years. And it's time to take a really hard look at that and see what you're missing out on, what you could be doing better, and what needs to improve for your next season. It's so easy to get stuck in ruts and routines and thinking the same as we thought before because it worked before. And that just leads to problems, and it degrades the experience over time because human beings naturally want to evolve the experience. We are wired, literally, our brains are wired for things that are out of the ordinary. That triggers serotonin and all those other chemicals in our brain, the pleasure chemicals, when we have something new and something different. And same lesson as the breeding gazelles and doing something 20% better this year than you did last year. Taking that advice, I've got to admit, I've really tried to put that advice into action here in the first quarter, and it's really done amazing things for my business because I started looking at the things I was already doing and just figuring out how to do them a little bit better. And for you innovative folks, for you people who are forward thinking, cutting edge type folks who want to do things differently, it's actually an interesting challenge because you're working on something that you're already good at, but you're improving that process and you're still using those creative muscles to get better and to do something a little bit differently. And so it kind of hits on both levels for us creative folks. So love that lesson. And I hope that maybe you are inspired by that and can put some of that into practice in your own business at your own club. And if you do, I'd love to hear about it and get you on the show and talk about it because that's what Private Club Radio is all about. All right. Well, today we're going to feature Mr. Frank Vane of the McMahon Group. Interesting discussion I have with Frank. I hope you enjoy it.
And now it's time for Club Perspectives, presented by the National Club Association.
Okay.
Welcome to another edition of Club Perspectives presented by the National Club Association. On this episode, I'm joined by Frank Vane, president of the McMahon Group, and he's also chairman of the board of the National Club Association. Frank, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Gabe. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Yeah, it's good to be back from China. So you're my first interview back in the United States, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you today.
Well, good to be with you. I'm actually calling and talking from the University Club in New York City, one of the country's and one of the world's great private clubs, and so it's always fun to see a monumental and historic club like this, and so good to be with you.
Yeah, it is great, and we were there about 2 years ago, I guess, for the NCA conference, and I just remember that library was gorgeous. It's one of the largest, if not the largest, private library in the world. So for that fact alone, it's worth checking that club out.
It is, and it's really it's the heart of what they do. They really value. The club is obviously it has a lot of social programs and all that, but continuing education, library research, all that really fits into it, and it really shows often the broad nature of the way clubs can impact and serve their members, and they do a great job over here.
That's great. Do they still make you wear a tie there? I think I walked in there tie-less, and they made me put one on.
They do. It's a rather formal dress code. Yes, there's a little conversation about it. It's part of the reason I'm here. But today it's still a very formal place.
Yeah, well, I think that's good. You got to have places like that. Well, today I want to talk to you about some governance and leadership issues. Our listeners have been asking about that, and who better to talk about that than you, Frank? So I know you've been focused a lot on board development committees. Can you explain what that's all about?
Well, yeah, I think it's really important. If you take the broader concept of club governance generally, if not most, many clubs having annual presidencies and turning over a good third of their board on an annual basis. That sort of discontinuity is really a challenge in an environment where clubs have to be really thoughtful and aware of what they're doing and chart a course for the future and all of those sorts of things. So I see the whole governance practice at a club, if you will, or structure at a club under a lot of pressure today, dealing as we do with a kind of a changing environment, and as clubs look to respond to what's going on in any of the activities and just society in general for their whole level of relevance and what they may offer. And so, I think a big part of that is looking at, board formation and who who we get around the table and how they get there and all of those sorts of things. As I observe it, clubs are really still, they very much approach the annual election, if you will, whether it's elected or by a slate. They still approach that as an event. We have to do that for this year, fill seats, get new board members, and don't think deeply enough about it as to what about the board members a couple of years from now, and how do we groom those people and identify them and all of those sorts of things. And it's really where this notion of really trying to talk with our client about thinking about that much more as a development practice rather than an event, and moving from this notion of a nominating committee. I really think about it more broadly as a development committee. That yes, we're going to end up getting a few nominees this year and get a few folks on the board, but what's the pipeline and how do we get people in the pipeline and all those sorts of things. And I think if we can really do that as an industry, much more impactful on how governance can be responsive and effective for each of the individual clubs.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like it. How many clubs are doing something like that right now?
Oh, it's a handful. I've got some good clubs out there that are, really do take the time to be thinking about it. But as we're working at it, once you really have the conversation about it and start thinking about it, I think the light bulb goes on, and people say, well, of course, kind of why wouldn't we do that? And so, I think it's just one of those things that by routine or habit, we've always thought that there's a nominating committee, and that's how you surface board members, and that's the process. And I'm not trying to intimate that every club is just offhand about that. They don't care. They give it some thought, but the more that you can really give it that structure and really think more deeply about the bench and who's on committees and getting committee chairs to identify kind of the all-stars on their committees, and then get those people and nurture them through the organization and provide them some support and some education to do that. So, I'd say right now it's maybe 1 in 10 that I would see out there that have really a more holistic view of governance and training and continuity and succession planning. But probably 9 out of 10, and unfortunately, probably close to 50-50, where it's almost a coin flip, or almost, we're going to have an election here in October, and so, in August we start talking about, let's put that nominating committee together and make sure that we are able to get through this year's election, and that's just not going to, cut it, frankly, in this day and age when, we've got to get the right people around the table. You've got to have the right skills and folks who, whether they know how to market or build things or whatever it is, they can bring some, skills and some representation of different, segments within the membership and get them around the table, critical to your success. And so that, really have to, begin to adopt policies and activities like this.
Yeah. Absolutely. What would be the first steps if a club wants to, start creating one of these board development committees? What would be the first steps to take?
Well, I think a lot of things. It's getting leadership in place, right? And there's certainly someone within the membership that probably has some experience in nonprofit leadership or corporate leadership or that sort of thing, but getting a passionate leader in place, so that and it's important that person is really seen as almost statesman is kind of the right word. That they're not doing this as a means of taking over leadership, kind of controlling that in an unacceptable form, but that they're that they have goodwill and they have experience, and that they're really, as I say, kind of that statesman attitude. That because you're going to touch on a variety of things there. It's going to get into. I mean, board development committees then look at also, how does the board function? What's the board doing and thinking about strategy and all those sorts of things. So they really, get their fingers in the pie of a number of aspects of governance. And so skills are important, just as it is with the board more broadly. But the person who's doing it having thought about, either say corporate or nonprofit governance, and have a passion for that subject, and frankly have the sort of the personality, if you will, that they're seen as constructive and soothing and non-confrontational, and thinking about putting a plan together.
Now, is that something that the McMahon Group can help with as well, if clubs are looking to pursue that?
Well, we can. We do it really within. I've really started to work it into our strategic planning activities, which is a good thing because whenever you're in strategic planning to begin with, you've got the attention. I know we've certainly broadcasted the industry for years and run that part of our practice where we believe that the board needs to own strategic planning, not an ad hoc committee or an outside group. And so as we're doing that, we have the current board around the table, and then a lot of times we'll bring in some past leaders and past presidents, and again, some of the sort of the wise old men and women, if you will, of the club to be part of that process, so that it really takes hold and grounded in the culture, but also thinking about the future. And any strategic plan has a section, focused on what's our approach to governance and management. So it's a good time to do that. So yeah, we'll typically, certainly if the board's open to it and sees the wisdom of it, we will build that model into the governance and management action plans within the strategic plan. What is the committee? What's their role? How do we form it? What's their job description? And really help them start to organize that process. And then that's something. And again, it can tie back to not only this notion of getting directors and everything else, but helping them to be stewards of their strategic plan, that they have it, that they're actually following it and implementing it, and working the plan and those sorts of things. That's again the kind of thing that a board development committee can work on.
Yeah, I absolutely recommend folks consider that next time they're going to go through the process of the strategic plan to get that in place. It sounds like it's really really useful moving forward for the club. Now, Frank, the other thing I wanted to chat with you about today was some of the initiatives that the NCA is doing. You as board chairman are helping to lead the charge there. So what are some of the issues the NCA is tackling right now in 2019?
Well, continue to be focused on, things that advance and protect, sort of the small business interest, if you will, that really what private clubs are, and what they can do to remain healthy and successful. I know we've seen some things in the past year, some taxing initiatives in Virginia and Maryland, in that area where local governments looking to reclassify clubs and tax their properties at a different way, and so NCA has rallied to the cause around those, and help push back some of that legislation. I mean, clubs continue to get targeted periodically as that group that supposedly has a lot of money, and they can they can afford to pay more, or all those sorts of things. And and like I say, at the heart of it, most of these are, well, they have a lot of land and they may have some assets. Most of these are pretty small businesses trying to get through, and can't really absorb some whatever multi-million-dollar
Right.
tax rates, because their property is suddenly classified as residential and taxed that way at a country club or things like that. So that's certainly a big one. Really, the biggest thing I think we've accomplished in the last year or two is overall the presence of our and the viability of our political action committee. We really have made that a strategic initiative. That the associations had representation. In fact, it's the only association with a full-time lobbyist on Capitol Hill for representing the club industry and club interest. And for many years, that sort of, again, just as associations and things do, we had it, but it was just sort of there. We've actually put a lot of attention on, building resources and getting donations to the PAC, getting the industry to understand more about what it's doing, and frankly, put more money in the coffers so that we can have representation. As you dig into these things, you find there are a lot of dinners, a lot of events, and politicians are looking at who are their friends and all of those sorts of things. So we've got a lot more money and focus going into our political action committee. That's allowed our representatives to attend a lot more events and events that we're holding where leaders of Congress have come through and participated. So we're really making sure that the voice of the NCA is heard on the Hill, and friends that we can find like John Thune and others who supporters of the industry and want to be part of that. We've tried kind of helping them, and they help us and look out for us, and so that's important. And a few times a year we're doing kind of Capitol Hill days where we go around and talk to people, and again that helps open up doors, and we're able to meet with people that share our interest. Certainly a big part of the last couple of years has been the H-2B visa program.
Yep.
And so we then partner with and meet with representatives who are in states that have the ski industry or other sorts of lots of tourism in their states, so they understand the economic engine of it. They understand what H-2B means and how seasonal workers and how that program is actually quite effective. The best sort of visa program that's out there. It's very, very little in terms of violations or challenge to it or anything else. These people do come in seasonally. They want a seasonal job. They fill jobs that are difficult, if not impossible, to otherwise fill. And then they return home, whether they're a student or somebody that spends, half the year here and half the year somewhere else, and really, advocating and have folks understand that process and that program, because it's one that's been wildly fluctuating from, no visas available to, the number pops up to this level or that level, sort of inconsistently over budget time and through budget periods. And and that makes it very difficult for clubs to rely on it. I happen to belong to the own club I belong to. They had some good success with golf course maintenance staff coming in through the program, and then all of a sudden, like 2 years ago, they were unable to get anyone in through the program. And now you're going in the season and you're short 8 or 10 folks out on the golf course, and frankly, we saw it in the conditions, and the jobs were available. We could not fill the job otherwise, and sort of they went unfilled, and we actually had a material decline in the in the conditions of our golf course. So, wow. So I think there's always the issues of whether it's healthcare or other programs that we're looking at, but I'd say the H-2B and overall just really concentrating on our PAC and making sure that the folks on Capitol Hill know who we are, and that we've got good partners with folks who share our interest in the hospitality field and what that means for labor and other challenges that we face.
Yeah. Well, I definitely recommend folks check out the Club PAC with the NCA. Head over to nationalclub.org, and you can see what the Club PAC's all about. You can fill out the form to get some more information about it and what they're doing, and check out all the NCA is doing over there, nationalclub.org. Frank, thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Club Perspectives. It was really enlightening, and again, I hope clubs take your advice there and start to think about a board development committee. Thanks so much, Frank.
Well, Gabe, always good to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity to do it, and look forward to talking to you again.
To learn more about the National Club Association, please visit nationalclub.org.
Well, that's going to wrap things up for today's episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me here once again on Private Club Radio. Tell me all about what you're doing differently at your club, and not only that, but what you are improving on. I'd love to get that story on Private Club Radio. I'll catch you back next week. Until then, here's to your membership success.
Private Club Radio is brought to you by Concert Golf Partners, helping to preserve and enhance private golf and country clubs. Concert Golf has the capital, expertise, and private club hospitality experience to help upscale private clubs achieving long-term success and membership growth. For 25 years, Concert Golf has allowed private club members to focus on simply enjoying their club. Visit concertgolfpartners.com to learn more about the recapitalization process.